Hey, what's up, y'all? It's Cheyenne Monet.
And I'm Matt, and you're listening to Sweet 732, the podcast where life is sweet.
And before you do anything, make sure you follow us online at Sweet 732 Pod. And this episode is sponsored by Millennial LLC. Millennial is a community of minority or women business owners known as Millennials that empower each other to become more financially competitive in their respective markets.
That's Millennial LLC, doing business better together.
And you can find more information out about this company at www.minwo.co. All right, let's get into the show. So thank you guys for listening. This is officially episode 1 of Sweet 732, the podcast. So thank you guys for listening. Give yourselves a round of applause.
Fake studio applause.
All right, so we're super excited. Without giving too much away, we're just going to cover a variety of topics, and we really just appreciate you guys listening to the first episode. So let's just get right into it. So our first show, we really thought that because we're the podcast to talk about all things millennial, we thought that it was really important to debunk a few myths of the millennial generation. So you want to kick us off?
Right. So the first myth that we are going to discuss is the myth that our generation does not believe in education. And the first thing that comes to mind when I first came across this myth was that this couldn't be further from the truth, obviously. So it's obviously a myth. I think that in our current generation, we place great importance on going to college. Specifically, I feel like the bachelor's is now not as powerful as it once was because it seems like everybody you know has got a bachelor's degree.
Right. I think the important thing to note is that education doesn't necessarily always mean going to college.
Right.
So there's alternative ways to get an education. Some people go to a trade school and, follow their specific trade that they might be passionate about. So getting an education doesn't necessarily mean you have to go to college. But of course, I do think a wide variety of our generation does go to college, and we do get that education.
Right. I think that if I'm putting on a different sort of hat, so to speak, I think that there is some degree of truth in that we don't believe in education, but I think that the truth lies that we don't believe in the traditional forms of education, like you talked about, in the whole go to college, go back and get a master's, go get a doctorate, what have you. We don't necessarily all subscribe to that theory of education anymore. Nowadays, it's like you said, you go to trade school, or some people just flat out get out and go and do. You go and you try to get an internship, and you get schooling in whatever profession it is that you're interested in, and you just learn by doing on the job rather than going to school for 4 years, and then you may end up in a completely different field than you originally intended to.
Right. I mean, a part of me has to say that as much as I think that education is important, I have my bachelor's degree and I'm working on my master's right now, so I do think education is important. But then there's a part of me that I really kind of don't believe in education, because the way that the education is set up, the education system is set up, it's formed in a way that while you're in high school and even those first couple of years of college, you're really not learning those things you need to succeed in the real world. And so that sets people up for failure. That's putting people out in the real world not having the skills that they need. And think about going to school and you're paying all this money to get a college degree, and it's like, yeah, cool, I checked off that box, right. But what did you really learn from that? What can you take away from that?
Right.
And so that part makes me not really believe in education.
Right. I definitely feel as though just the whole, and not to mention the crippling student debt, or student loan debt rather. So it's almost like you can still reach the levels of success that you want without going to formal schooling. And I think that, the internet, as I'm surely going to discuss at length at some point on our show, is the great equalizer, because you don't have to sit in a book in a classroom to become educated.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I definitely think that the last 2 years of your college bachelor's degree is the most important. That's when you actually get into your major, where you're actually learning real life things that you can use. That you can use towards your job in the future. But I mean, overall, a part of me really doesn't believe in the education system. And also, even let me just take it a step back and take it to even when you're in elementary school, you know, I feel like they have a hard time separating students to determine their strengths and their weaknesses. And so they put everybody on an even playing field. And that causes difficulties with some students where I might be really good at math, but I might be struggling with my reading. And if you put me next to a kid and I'm, you know, in first or second grade and this kid is like reading like he's in fifth grade, I'm going to feel a little self-conscious about myself.
So you want specialization at an early age in terms of potential career path?
Definitely.
But even as young as what grade did you say?
It doesn't matter. From like day one, I think that it's important when you go to school, they need to determine what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are.
Right.
So for example, if I'm really, really good at math, maybe they can look at me and be like, you know what, she might be good in a STEM field one day because she's picking up on math really quickly. She might be a good engineer or a good mathematician. So if they determine that early on and now they're playing on my strengths even more, now I'm like, okay, I'll start to think about it more. Now they have those parent-teacher conference and they tell my parent, oh, you know what, Cheyenne's really good at math. You know what, you should really like start to think about exposing her to the engineering fields and things like that and the STEM fields at an early age. Then now my parents can also instill that in me, and now they are realizing my strength. Because remember, when you're at school, you're there most of your day. You're not, right, you know, with your parents. So your parents aren't really seeing that.
How you perform academically in the classroom.
Right. So if your teachers are able to like see what a big strength you have is, they should play off of that.
Right. So I've got to go all the way back to when you said you kind of have lost a little bit of trust in the education system. I still believe in the education system. However, and we're going to get into this also at a later date, I think that there are tweaks to be made in the education system.
Right.
I think that the role that some of the classes that I've taken have definitely shaped the things I thought I wanted to do, the things that I feel like I'm naturally passionate about. I think that came from like going and sitting in on certain classes. However, like to your point, I think that we do need to place greater effort in kind of specializing and allowing us to kind of, if I don't want anything to do with math and engineering, why am I learning SOHCAHTOA and why am I learning the Pythagorean theorem? I don't understand how that is going to benefit me in my career if my passion is freelance writing and journalism or photography or whatever, or the arts, if I'm interested in acting or music. And I know that there are courses that allow you to kind of express yourself. Right. Yeah. But I also feel like those classes are too few and far between. And especially at the high school level, and again, not to go too far in depth because we got a couple other things to talk about, but I think at the high school level, it's especially important that we begin to push kids into their passions and the things that they actually want to do rather than kind of hamstring them to taking a bunch of core courses that they don't care about and are never going to revisit upon graduating high school.
Right. And to add to that, I really did, not looking back, I really did appreciate my high school that I went to because it was a magnet school. And if you guys don't know, magnet school is basically where you have a quote unquote, it's like having a college major, but in high school. So you have a specialized track that you take. And so you have to apply to get into the school. So it's not like a regular zone school that you just go to because you live in a neighborhood. You have to apply to get into the school. And it's this expectation put on the students like, yes, you have to do good in your math and your reading and your science, but you also need to go above and beyond and excel in your magnet classes, whether it be in business or in IT, or we had automotive, we had cosmetology, we had like a little bit of everything. So that really was like great because, you know, it put a higher expectation on us to do better. And it allowed me to formalize my thoughts and to prepare myself for going to college. So now when I went to college, I kind of knew what I was going to get myself into. But also, going to magnet schools opens you up to more opportunities where you're able to get internships. Like I got my internship my senior year of high school, which worked out for me because now I've been working there ever since. But it allows you to get like internships and things like that, even, you know, while you're still in high school. So it opens up the doors for you. So I personally, I'm a little weary about the education system. I think there are some things they need to change. I think it's great that where I grew up, they had that magnet system for the high school, and even some of the middle schools, because I went to a magnet middle school also. So even some of the middle schools had that too. But they need to be like more widespread.
Right. I think that model needs to be something of the standard, because I compare that to my experience growing up, and I was always interested in sports and entertainment marketing. And at my high school, which was a public school, there was marketing 1 and marketing 2. And I'm pretty sure that was end of.
Very basic.
Nothing, yeah. And I mean, granted, there were like clubs that you could join. There was DECA, to which I can't recall the acronym for it. But there was that club, and they went and they did marketing showcases and had to compete across, the nation and whatnot. And that's great exposure. But if you're not a part of DECA and you're still interested in sports and entertainment marketing, then what?
Right.
So
exactly.
I still hold faith in the system, but I think that the system is in dire need of a facelift.
Yeah. Well, I hold faith in it only because eventually I will have children growing up in the future generations, and hopefully the education systems are a little bit better, specifically the public school system, so that I don't have to pay money to put my child in a private school.
Right.
But anyway, let's move on to the next topic. So we did want to talk about the myth that we lack loyalty to our employer. So what do you think about that?
I agree. I don't actually think that's a myth. I think that our loyalty is actually, it's not that we lack loyalty to our employers. It's that we have the utmost loyalty to ourselves as it pertains to our career. I feel as though rather than make the mistakes of, say, our parents or our grandparents, aunts and uncles, etc., rather than us stay working at the same job for like 15, 20, 30 years and not get our just due at the end of the day, we decide when we feel it's time for us to move on to bigger and better things, and don't put that decision in the hands of the employer. So that's where I think our loyalty lies.
A part of me kind of thinks that we can be loyal to our employers. I think it just depends on the organization. So for example, if you're working in a big organization that allows you to grow and climb up the ladder and do different things, experience different jobs, and you have good benefits, you treat your employees well, they have good work-life balance, I see no reason why people wouldn't want to stay in that particular company. Now they might move within the company, but staying within that company, I don't see why people wouldn't want to do that.
Right. Well, I think people will stay as long as, like you said, those other intangible things are all in place. But I think that ultimately it's going to come down to, I think our generation specifically is very, very interested in the idea and the concepts of entrepreneurship. So at the end of the day, regardless of whatever company you're with, if it's not your company, it's always going to kind of feel like, I'm doing this and I like doing it, but could I take the step and do it for myself so I could pass it on to my children and potentially my grandchildren, so they'll have something to say as their own.
Right. And I mean, I think that's one of the best things about being a millennial, but also just being an American in general, that you have that opportunity to be an entrepreneur and to start your own companies if you see fit.
Exactly.
But in addition to that, I think that the rotation of, the turnovers of employees is so rapid that it's probably hard for an employer to keep up. People are usually staying in a job for 3 years, right, maybe 5 years, and they're on to the next. And I personally don't even really think that this is just millennials, because I've had some of my mentors at my job who, are 20 years older than me, and they said the same thing, like, listen, you got a new job, cool, you got a new position, great. In 3 years, you need to be out looking for the next position, because there's only so much that you can do in one position. And I completely get where they're coming from. But also, I think that it's important for employers, not just a big corporation, but also your management and your supervisors. Yeah. They need to be able to recognize your strengths, but also be respectful to the fact that, like, we did go to college, we did go and get a 4-year degree. And for majority of the time, we have a degree and we come in with more background knowledge and more skills than a lot of the people who have already been working there for a long time. And the only reason why they have an upper hand is just because they've been working there for so long. And so now we've gone to school, we got our degree, we checked that box off. We have experience, whether it be an internship or just things we learned in school. And so now we're coming in with a lot of just knowledge in general and a lot of things that we can contribute to the organization. So now it's time for you guys to respect that, pay us accordingly, treat us respectfully, don't treat us like we're your children, and make sure that we're on an even playing field. I mean, you laugh, but I'm really serious.
No, I know. It sounds like there's an element of like personal.
I mean, it is personal because I mean, like I said, I've worked in my corporation. I've worked there since I was literally in high school. And so when I was in high school, I was an admin, and you know, moving up in the organization was great, but I moved up and I realized I have to move from one organization to the next, even within the same employer, and only because even within the same corporation. And I only say that because while I'm moving up within the same smaller organization, people are still seeing me as, oh, that high school girl. Oh, she's just out of high school. And it's like, no, I have a 4-year degree, which most of you can't even say you have. So you need to respect that.
Well, I think that that's specific to the field, right? Because when I first came into my current field, I knew nothing about the field I was getting into. And I took the job because it was like, listen, the check is nice.
But so what? It doesn't matter if you have no knowledge of the field. The fact that you're a millennial, you're going to pick it up.
Right.
Very quickly. So it doesn't matter if you have it doesn't matter if you have no knowledge at all. They need to respect you as if you do, because you're an equal employee, just like everyone else.
Respect is unquestioned, but I also think that like we gotta kind of bust our chops when we don't know stuff, just like the ones before us kind of have to bust their chops too.
Yeah, but the ones before us who've been working there for a long time, are they taking the time out to sit with you and look at you as a quote unquote maybe mentor where you can teach them some things?
But see, I think that point right there is kind of why we as millennials don't necessarily enjoy sticking around, and we kind of want to go and get as much as we can for ourselves as quickly as we can, because at some point Father Time Father Time is undefeated. So at some point you're going to become that same old person behind the desk that you despise when you were in the early stages of your career. So it's better to kind of continue to elevate yourself and to kind of keep pushing the boundaries and searching for new and better opportunities, as opposed to just kind of sitting around in one particular job occupation. Because the truth of the matter is your managers and supervisors aren't always going to, they may recognize you for your efforts and the work you do, but they're not going to reward you accordingly.
Right.
And so it's
and I think
up to
that's
you
the
to
problem.
kind of, exactly.
Right. And that's the problem, because sometimes I've seen in my workplace that even if I'm doing the same exact work as the person sitting next to me, just because they've been there for a few years longer than me, they're going to get that bonus or that promotion before me. And I never think that's right. Or even if I'm doing a better job than that person is doing, and I have more credentials, I've gone to school, I've checked all these boxes off, but the person who's been here for 10 years is going to get a promotion before me.
Right.
I think that's the problem, and that's why people are not willing to stay in with a particular employer. You have to make sure, and when I say respect, I literally mean respect the work that a person is doing by rewarding them accordingly.
I think it's, like you said, that comes down to company politics, which to me is like the thing I hate about corporate the most, which is playing the political games where such and such has been there for X number of years, so they're entitled to a promotion, or such and such is buddies with the boss, so they're gonna get a raise despite the fact that you've been working twice as hard as them. So I think those are also the reasons why, rather than sit around and wait for our just due, we kind of tend to go out and get it ourselves.
All right. So let's move on to the next topic, because we kind of went off on a little tangent on that one. So just the next topic we wanted to talk about is that people believe that millennials suck at dating. How can we just sum this up?
I don't think that that's necessarily a myth.
Exactly.
I think that what's happened from what I've seen is these days it's a lot easier to get in touch with people to date. It's as simple as just sliding a DM or jumping on to somebody's Facebook page or Twitter or whatever. It's real easy to get in touch. So because of that, you don't have to necessarily approach somebody and be blessed with the gift of gab. You don't have to be able to kind of talk to somebody, and that just makes dating substantially more difficult and awkward.
I mean, like, literally, I'm laughing right now because I was actually having a conversation with one of my former coworkers, and I said something about, like, talking to people online, and they were like, what? You just, like, talk to people you don't know, like, on the internet? And I was like, yeah, like, it's like, I mean, everybody's doing it. It's not that big of a deal. And they're like, so, like, how do you do that? And I'm like, well, you just, slide in the DMs. They're like, a DM? I'm like, yes, a direct message. Right. And they're like, oh, I didn't even know you can do that. So, like, you just send messages to, like, strangers? Like, what do you say? And I'm like, well, it depends on what your intentions are.
Unfortunately, there will be many people from our generation who met their king and their queen at their local bar or their local nightclub off the hookup tip.
And it's nothing wrong with that. I mean, like, yeah. But I mean, like, I do think that a part of our generation does suck at dating, but I don't think that that's because we as a people suck at dating. I think that because there's just so many options and we have so much accessibility to everyone, not just the people in our little town.
Right. So to finish the point that I was just going to say, right, there's going to be some that say that, but then there's also going to be a vast majority who say, oh, I met them in the DM.
Right.
And that to me is kind of like, imagine explaining that to your child.
Yeah. I mean, but then by that time...
I mean, that's the way it's going, though, right?
Exactly. I mean, and by the time you have kids, it really won't be, like, that big of a deal. Now, explaining it to your parents is a different story because they'll be like, I don't understand.
Grandparents, God forbid you tell it to grandma.
They'll literally be like, I don't understand what that means. Like, please explain to me.
But you know what? I got to shoot us some bail, right? Because I don't necessarily know that it is... I think we are not as good at romance as generations prior. There's not a lot of
chivalry.
Like, we'll get into that at a later date. But I think that we're substantially more picky, and we take a lot more time in choosing our partners carefully than probably the generations prior.
Yeah, I mean, a part of that is because we have high expectations for ourselves, so we want the same expectations for our partners. Like me, for example, I went to school and I have a college degree. So no offense to the guys out there who don't have college degrees, but me personally, I would not be looking to date someone who doesn't have a college degree. I'm setting that expectation for the person that I'm gonna date because I want them to have the same, if not more than what I have, to encourage me to do better. If I'm pulling up with a college degree, you got a high school diploma, I should be able to encourage you to go get a degree or to do whatever you have to do to be successful in whatever your career. And that doesn't necessarily mean all careers need college degrees because we know that's not true. Right. But be successful in your career. If that means you got to go take this trade school class or whatever to be successful in your career, that little 18-month class or whatever, go do it. Like, you should be able to encourage that other person. So yes, I think that we just have high expectations. And is anything wrong with that? No. Maybe our parents and our grandparents should have had higher expectations too. I mean, like, why should you set your expectations low?
There's nothing funnier than seeing two old miserable people together.
Literally. And it's like, why are you together? Why? I don't understand. Is it just because, like, now you just feel like it's nothing you could do?
They're like, shit, I guess we stuck.
Yeah, and people were getting married back then when they're like 18. Right. Like the baby boomers and stuff, all the men were going off to the war, so they're like, okay, well, let's lock this down real quick before I leave. Exactly. So it's like, all right, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, all right, you the one for me. And granted, that's an exaggeration, but let's lock it down. So it was different back then, obviously. And even like for our parents' generations, I know my parents aren't that old, and so like even for their generation, it was completely different, than us. We do things that are just different, more
unorthodox, if you will,
strategic,
or that works.
We don't necessarily we might think about your feelings, to a certain extent.
But we completely disregard them at the same time.
Literally, yeah. God. You gotta focus on your own feelings.
Yeah.
Obviously there's a bigger conversation that's needed about dating.
We could go into this all night.
Right. But let's just wrap that topic up there. Did you want to go into the next topic?
Yeah, let's...
Yeah, so the last one that we wanted to talk about really quickly was that the myth that millennials spend money poorly and that we're financially illiterate.
Spend money poorly. Complete and utter fact. Are financially illiterate? I disagree.
Spend money poorly. A part of me agrees with that. A part of me doesn't.
On the whole, no. We all don't spend money poorly. I think that there has been an emphasis on doing extra unnecessary, lavish things.
Living your life. Right. Living your best life.
Yeah, there's been an abundance of that. Living above your means, fake flexing, stunting, and all that other stuff. There's been an abundance of that when it's not needed. But I think that on the whole, do we understand money a bit differently and better than the generations before? I don't know that I can say that we do. But I also think that we are very aware of things like 401ks, retirements, investments. We are very conscious of how we spend our money in the grand scheme. Probably more so than, I would say, maybe not our parents, but certainly I'd say our grandparents.
Yeah. To be honest, if we're financially illiterate, I'm going to go ahead and blame that on our parents. It's no reason why they should have let us out in the real world and allow us to be financially illiterate. Financial literacy is probably one of the most important things that you need to have, because you're really going to learn it by trial and error, but your parents do need to instill that in you. So if we're financially illiterate, I'll go ahead and accept that one as a whole for the millennial generation as a whole, because come on, our parents should have taught us that. But also back to our education system, when we're in high school, they should be teaching financial literacy classes and making that a requirement. As far as spending money, honestly, I don't think it's anything wrong with being out here living your best life. I feel like within the past year, that's what we've done. We've lived our best life. Yes, but we've also lived within our means. We've saved up to do all the things we've done.
I think that's the balance.
It is a balance, but some people do live outside of their means. Who's allowing them to live outside of their means, though? Because if you regardless of the yes man, if you're able to go out and you're going out the country this week, and then 2 months from now, you're out in a different country doing this. And we all know those people because we see them on our timelines. They're going here, they're going there, they're flexing, doing all of that stuff.
Eating spam.
But then they come home and they're eating oodles and noodles and hot dogs with no hot dog roll. And they use the sandwich bread as a hot dog roll because they don't got no money for actual hot dog rolls. They don't even have enough money to pay their bills. There's somebody enabling them to allow them to do that.
Right.
Whether that be their parents or grandparents or somebody's enabling them to do that.
Right. So I agree. I think that I think that there are swathes of our generation that spend money horribly. But on the whole, I think that our understanding of the importance of finances and having your money in check, I think that we do as a whole understand that. Right. Can I hit you with I did some prep, so can I hit you with some stats?
Go ahead.
So it says, and I'm quoting an article right here from an anonymous source. Even though millennials have had less than 20 years to build their retirement wealth, they are not that far behind many of those who are closest to retirement. Nearly 60% of millennials have less than $10,000 saved for retirement, but roughly half of baby boomers are in the same boat, despite the fact that this generation has had as much as half a century to save for their retirement.
This generation meaning the baby boomers?
This generation being us, I believe, if I understand that correctly.
A part of me is it our fault that the baby boomers they didn't save enough money?
I'm sorry, you were right.
This generation being the baby boomers.
Right,
yeah, so that's on them. Also, let me just throw in one little thing is that we're all paying Social Security right now, and we're paying for those baby boomers. By the time we're able to retire, Social Security is probably going to be obsolete. And so now we're paying all this money for them to basically live
life, their best life.
Right. So yes, of course, that's something wrong with that system that they should have changed a long time ago. I mean, like, I remember at one point they were trying to instill a policy that whatever money you put into Social Security, that's the money that you're gonna get. You have your own account. Come on, I mean, that makes sense. But no, it's like you're just throwing money into this imaginary pot. Yeah. Imaginary. It doesn't really exist. Like, I really am. I might be a conspiracy theorist. I honestly think that it doesn't exist. Like, I think that we're throwing money into this pot. It might be, I don't know, $20 a paycheck. Maybe it might be more than that, depending on how much you make. Right. They're throwing money into this pot. The government's probably taking that money and investing in it, probably smartly, so they can make a little bit of profit off of it and use it in different ways. But I honestly don't think that pot really exists, like a lot of things. But
like a lot of things. We'll touch on that. I'm also later date.
But I mean, like, also, I just want to throw in that our generation, I think we put a higher emphasis on doing small things like happy hours and meeting up with our friends. So, like, it's nothing for us to be like, yeah, what you doing? Okay, let's go grab a drink real quick, or let's go to the local bar and get some wings or whatever. And so, like, that money obviously adds up. But I think that we just place a higher emphasis on doing small things like that, like meeting up with people here and there. I mean, I know within the past month, I've met up with like a few groups of people separately. And it's like, oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And it's like, oh, wait, hold on. I'm going out twice in 1 week. Maybe I need to like chill out a little bit.
Reel it in.
So it's like, you know, I feel like everybody has that balance. But, you know, whatever. We out here living our best life. What can you do? What can you say about that?
Be mindful of how you spend your money.
Well, anyway, let's just wrap it up there. So thank you guys again for listening to the first episode of Sweet 730C, the podcast. We really appreciate it.
Yep.
Make sure you guys follow us online at Sweet 730C Pod. We'll post the article that we quickly touched on at the end. We'll post that in the description section.
It's got a bunch of other useful information there too.
Right, so make sure you guys follow us online, subscribe, share, comment. Leave us some comments to let us know what you think.
Yeah, let's get a conversation going about all the other myths that you guys may have heard about the millennial generation and, hell, even generations prior. Let's start the conversation.
All right, so thank you guys again. This is Sweet 730C, the podcast where life is sweet. Thanks
for listening.